Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I thought I'd discuss which year post-split was the best year for Beatles fans. And I was doing this game with Richie, my son, the other day, and actually we were trying to name which year we had the most records in our collection from. And it came down to 2 years, 70 and 73, were easily the front runners, and given that our collection is quite dominated by Beatles, it's no surprise that those 2 years they're the two I'm going to compare, because I don't think there's any other year which really comes close. So these two I'm going to put them head to head and go through month by month, and I'll tell you what came out respectively. So January, we've got nothing coming out in either year. February, we've got the Beatles' Hey Jude album coming out in the US, which admittedly didn't have any new tracks on it, although certain tracks had not been available on an album before. But it's such a great cover and back cover. It's a worthy release. So that was February. And then also John put out a single, Instant Karma, which I don't have on 45, but it appeared on this album later, Shaved Fish. So that was February, nothing in 73 yet. March, we've got Ringo coming out with Sentimental Journey, March 1970, end of March, which was the first proper Beatles solo album, if you don't count Wonderwall and stuff. So that was interesting. And then 73 makes its first entry with this single, My Love, which would end up on Rose Speedway, but the B-side, The Mess, would not. So I'm tossing up B-sides which don't make it onto the album for both years. So Instant Karma is obviously not on an album, well, not until Shaved Fish from John, and The Mess from Paul, Wings. Then we've got also in March, we've got the Beatles put out Let It Be single, and whilst the song Let It Be was on the Let It Be album, the single version is different. I don't know if I'll count that as an extra track, because it's not, but it's generally, I think, well, I prefer the LP version. I think it's better produced by Phil Spector than this one. But anyway, on the B-side, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number was not on any album, so that was unique to that single for a while anyway. Then in April, we had Paul in 1970 coming up with the McCartney album, April the 17th. Brand new solo album, first solo album from him. Mixed reactions from the critics, but as Carr and Tyler said, hindsight displays its charms. And then in April of 73, so this is where 73 starts catching up. So Red Rose Speedway came out end of April from Paul McCartney and Wings, and as we know, it was going to be a double album, but it ended up just being that single. And then these two retrospective albums came out, The Red and the Blue, which didn't offer any new tracks, but just a timeless cover, and just worth having the album just for the cover alone, really. And also the gatefold from King's Cross, St Pancras Gardens, July 68. So that's April 73, and then May, we've got in 1970 the Beatles put out Let It Be, May the 8th in the UK, and that was an important release, clearly. So if you can see, both years, a lot of goodies coming out here. May in 73, George would put out Living in the Material World, his follow-up to All Things Must Pass, stellar album. George would also put out the Give Me Love single, which had Miss O'Dell on the B-side. And then we move into June, and we've got the single Live and Let Die in 73 from Paul McCartney and Wings, with I Lie Around on the B-side, which I forgot to count as an extra track, not on an album. So we've got nothing in July, nothing in August from either year. Then in September 1970, Ringo comes out with his second solo album, Bo Coops the Blues, which I think is up there with his best solo work. I know Thomas Calden, you agree, and not Nicholas Schaffner, Bob Woofenden, in his book The Beatles Apart, also agrees. And country music fits Ringo like a glove, and he does a superb job singing other people's tunes, but none the worse for that. So that's September. Also in September, but in '73, Ringo came out with Photograph, which had the track Down and Out, which would not appear on the Ringo album. Moving on to October, I don't have it to show you, but Ringo came out with a single of Bo Coops the Blues, the title track, and Coochie Coochie was a B-side. Here it is, sorry, just had it hidden. Coochie Coochie was the B-side, so that's counting as a unique song. And then also in October, but in '73, Paul put out Helen Wheels, Paul McCartney and Wings, Helen Wheels with Country Dreamer on the B-side. Moving towards the end of the year now, in November, we've got George putting out his mammoth All Things Must Pass, end of November, one of the very best solo albums of all time, and also the single My Sweet Lord, although that didn't have any extra tracks on it or anything. But, you know, '73 is trying to keep up because Mind Games came out in '73 in November from John. And then in December, both years finish extremely strongly. We've got Plastic Ono Band in 1970 from John Lennon Plastic Ono Band. His timeless, emotional debut, where he's really bearing his soul. And then a double whammy in '73 for Beatles fans. We got the Ringo album coming out, which is probably, you know, in his top 2 or 3 solo albums, along with Bo Coops the Blues. And also in early December, Band on the Run from Paul McCartney and Wings. So what a treasure trove. And the Mind Games single came out in just before the album, but that didn't have any extra tracks. But so as you can see, both years chock-a-block with releases, and I counted up 7 albums in each year, Beatles and solo Beatles. Although the Beatles albums didn't contain any new material, they're still interesting releases, still essential, I think. Even for the die-hard fan, one needs to pick up those, the Hey Jude and the Red and the Blue, for completeness' sake. And then in terms of singles not on albums, I counted 3 in 1970 and no less than 8 in 1973 tracks appearing on singles which weren't on an album. But I think if there was a tie break between these 2 years, I'd have to give it to 1970, because All Things Must Pass was a double with plus the Apple Jam, so that probably tips the balance in its favour. But it's a very close run thing, and I think you'll agree that those 2 years were the richest in terms of output from the solo Beatles post-split. So hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. See you next time.